Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about the many faces of Dean Winchester. Over the course of the series, Dean got to be a lot of different versions of himself, both as Dean and possessed, obsessed, all kinds of things. So we're going to talk about all those different characters that were still, in some way, Dean Winchester. But before we get into that, let's get started. And I'm going to start with Michelle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Crowley. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a professor of communication studies and popular culture at Northern Kentucky University.
Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker. I'm a writer and editor, former journalist. I came to Supernatural late in the game, but I'm an unabashed Dean girl, which I'm very happy to be here tonight talking about Dean. And I have edited a book about music in North and South Carolina called Making Notes. And I helped Ann Moses write her memoir of her time as editor of Tiger Beat magazine back in the 60s and early 70s.
Okay, Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been with Supernatural since the very first episode.
Okay, Carole.
Carole Stokes. I am a fan since season 3. I write fanfic, all of which is on AO3 under Fire Sign 10. And I love talking about Supernatural.
Melissa.
I'm Melissa. I've been a fan since the pilot. That's about it.
Okay. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy and urban fantasy and more stuff. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But in all the modern worlds, they're all places Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. I've been a fan since midway through season 11, at which point I binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months. And I went down the rabbit hole at that point and have not seen the light of day since. So, the many faces of Dean. So many things to discuss here, and I can't wait to dive into it. So let's start at the very beginning. We see young Dean in a number of episodes throughout the series, sometimes as a child, stuck in a hotel room taking care of Sammy, sometimes as a teenager or a preteen. What is there to say about young Dean Winchester, especially now that we know the rest of the story? Anne?
Well, I'm a big fan of the teen Dean that Dylan Everett played in 3 episodes, and particularly I liked the Bad Boys episode where we see Dean get his first kiss. We see him independently from John and Sammy, and see him sort of finding his way, and we learn through the course of that episode that he wrestled and was a championship wrestler in school, and he did really well in school, and that's just a side of Dean that we didn't really realize until we saw his background that way. And I think that Dylan did an excellent job channeling Jensen's Dean into the young boy and taking just enough that we see how, he became our Dean, the adult Dean. So I'm a big fan of the way they handled that in all of those episodes. He was in one episode where he wasn't in it very much, the Sully episode with Just My Imagination, but it also showed him as he matured a little bit. And I just thought that whoever cast him did a fantastic job. And then the episode where he was the Hansel and Gretel show where he was cursed and became young Dean, became teen Dean again, it was just marvelous the way he channeled the adult Dean into the teen Dean, I thought.
Yeah, some of what came out of Teen Dean's mouth in that Hansel and Gretel episode was just, wash your mouth, except he's a 30-something guy. So yes, you can say that. Like, that's never been said to you before. Uh-huh. Elektra.
I like when they're showing him as a kid. The whole taking care of Sam came through really, really strongly. And you can see where he got the I'm going to watch over my brother when they were older came from. He seemed to take the whole we're going to hunt things and I'm going to learn how to shoot and all that really seriously, where Sam was a little more reluctant at first. I told Dad I was scared of the monster under my bed, and Dad gave me a gun. And Dean was like, well, yeah, you need to be able to shoot that thing. And that always came through when we saw them as kids, that Dean was ready to just dive right into this life.
Okay, Carole?
He did that well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did very well.
I certainly concur with that, because even when Dean is a little older, say Brock Kelly Dean in an after school special, even though he's busy making time with, the blonde cheerleader, he's nonetheless keeping an eye out for Sammy, and telling and, watching out for him and having Sam watch himself. I think the heartbreaking one for me is something wicked when he goes out to play a pinball game for, 20 minutes or something, and his father comes in and dumps the guilt all over him, and you feel for him so badly, because he shouldn't even be the one doing this. He shouldn't be the one who has to serve Sammy the last of the Lucky Charms and watch over him. But certainly that kind of guilt moment sticks with him forever, for the rest of his days, because that's always his number one, his paramount objective is take care of Sam, and I think they did really well in just casting all of the young Deans. Certainly Dylan Everett was particularly memorable, but I think all of them really did a really good job. Dylan's shining moment has to be, though, that Hansel and Gretel, where he's not just young Dean, he's actually Dean just in a young body, and he's commenting on all the foibles of the young body, and it's hysterical. It's just hysterical. There's no grass in the infield. So yeah.
It's up. What's going on? Come on. Well, and it was just so much fun in that episode to see Sam interacting with Dean at that age, now looking at him as younger instead of the older, knows everything big brother. And then that one woman says, your son is so polite.
And he made that memorable underoos crack, which I think if I were Sam, I would have held that over him for a long, long time.
Yeah. Melissa?
My favorite was the younger Dean, because, okay, I love both boys, but I don't love them equally. I don't love them the same. I love them both, but there's definitely a difference. Dean with the Lucky Charms and then the Samulet, it informed us so much of who Dean is, why he is the way he is. It is one of those first clear, I am not a John Winchester fan. And that was one of those John Winchester A+ parenting moments where he's left these kids alone and they're practically starving because he's off chasing whatever monster of the week this is. And that episode and that version of Dean is where it's like I fell in love with him, and that was like lock, stock, barrel. That was it. That was done, because here is why this guy is the way he is.
Mm-hmm. And one of the young Deans that nobody's mentioned because it isn't Dylan, but I thought the actor did a great job, was the flashback episode in season 15, where they come back to the Baba Yaga episode at the hotel, where they thought they got the monster and it isn't gone. And I thought that actor had big shoes to fill with Dylan and expectations, but I thought he did a good job. And we saw Dean having again to be so much older than he was as a child. And when he finds those bodies of the missing children in that basement, and he is, he has this moment where he thinks he sees Sam there, and he doesn't tell Sam to protect him, but it creeps him out. I mean, it affects him, and we can see that. And I thought he did a great job of showing all those nuances and micro expressions that Jensen does so well, that brings so much depth to Dean's character, because I don't know too many other actors you can have tight shots of, not just because they're handsome, but because every little twitch and muscle clench and eye wink means something. He can say so much with his face without saying a word. And I thought some of the younger actors captured that pretty well. So we've had young Dean, but then there is Jensen in episodes 1 and 2, where he was young Dean, and we get to see him grow up and mature. But what about that? We never really get to see, we talked a little bit about pre-Stanford Dean before Sammy went away, but then in season 1 especially, we get, when Sammy comes back, that young Dean, he's a very different Dean. What do you think, Elektra?
One of the things that becomes clear as we move through the series is just how scared that Dean must have been, who went looking for Sam at college. Dad had been missing for a while, because when we start seeing these flashbacks, Dean is always the one who is fine going off and taking the lead on pretty much everything. And yet when Dad was missing, he went back and found Sam because he wanted Sam for backup. And him and Dad had been doing stuff for a long time after Sam left. And yet this was something that scared him enough. He wanted Sam there too. There's a lot of codependency there that we could probably spend an hour talking about.
Well, and we found out in the final episode how scared Dean was to go back for Sam. That Sam would turn him away. And that I thought was a real revelation as well into the vulnerability of Dean at that age. Carole?
He's certainly a lot more lighthearted in the beginning. We see a lot more of joking Dean, poking fun at Sammy, making jokes at Sammy's expense. Just kind of like a little more happy-go-lucky in that they don't have a happy-go-lucky life. But when you compare him, say, with Dean by season 5, and the gravity has really increased. So we have a Dean here who's like, ready to put down that monster and then go meet a lady, and just a lot more. He's especially happy because he does have Sammy by his side now. And he's just he's less burdened. He meets a monster and he kills it, and that's it. There's no overriding pressures or, long-term arcs with monsters. I mean, there's certainly none of the angel stuff or anything. And he's just like, monster, kill it. Monster, kill it. Might get injured. Okay, I'll get better. Go out and kill another monster. Go to a bar, get lucky. So it's definitely a much more lighthearted Dean.
Mm-hmm. And we also see a little bit of that come back in the last 2 episodes of the series, when
Yes.
you know Dean is the one that's like, hey, let's go to this pie festival, and let's live our lives, let's go after these werepires, or let's, and we see that kind of like that jovial, like childlikeness come back,
Yeah.
unfortunately at the very end, but that's because he has had this weight absolutely lifted from his shoulders, and we can see him be that season 1 cocky Dean again.
Absolutely.
Melissa?
He didn't have as many walls back then. He was more open, and I think that's why we saw more of the smart aleck. We saw him joking around more, even though we know that Dean uses his humor as walls, but it still feels like he was just, those walls weren't built quite as high yet, especially with Sam. He seemed like he was a little bit, he's got Sammy back, so he's a little bit more open, but at the same time, it also feels to me like he was afraid of losing him again, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think one of the other things is we see Dean without that crushing load of guilt in the first season. John has not said, if you can't save him, you'll have to kill him. He hasn't lost John. He doesn't feel responsible for John's death. And in the very early episodes, he doesn't even feel responsible for Roy and the Reaper and the woman who died to save him. So Dean without guilt is a lot lighter and, as you said, focused on doing the job, but also focused on having a good time. And he's very much a 26-year-old guy who, is king of the walk.
Well, in that first episode, they get a hold of John Winchester's book. And they spend that first couple of seasons with that understanding that Dad's pretty much fought all the monsters. And there's information about all of them buried in that book somewhere. And all I have to really do is go look in the book, and that will give them the answers that they need for most things. And that's pretty much their life. And it isn't until they get into, season 5 with the angels, that they start running into things that are so far outside what they were looking for. Because Dean is certain there are no angels, and then suddenly there are, that they get really confused, and that turns his world upside down. And maybe it isn't so happy-go-lucky. There are no monsters out there that I can't figure out what it is I need to do to kill them, and I'm going to go do it. Just tell me how to gank them,
Yeah, one of my favorite things in one of those very early episodes is when he and Sam are on that bridge, and he's walking behind Sam, and he just smacks him up the side of the head from behind. And I'm thinking, that is such a brother move. That is so totally a brother move. It felt so real. Anne?
Well, I have to agree with everything y'all have said, but I also want to add that in those first early episodes is where we see Dean not being father to Sammy in particular, but especially in the third episode, Dead in the Water, where he communicates with the little boy who is not speaking, and it's Dean who sits down on the floor. I mean, when I watched that episode the very first time, my expectation was that Sam would be the one that would be good with kids. But in that episode, that sets up that Dean is so good with children, and he connects with that little boy. And then, of course, he saves him in that dramatic scene. And it really, and then okay, he's really good with kids because he raised Sam. And I mean, and that's, again, your A+ parenting for John Winchester, but that's how he's so good with children. And it follows through to Ben and what was the other one I thought of? There was another kid that he was really good with. And I just called him Dad Dean. And the kid in the Bad Boys that had the action figure, and his mother was killing off people that were threatening him. He was really good with that kid. And So that's, I call him Dad Dean.
Well, and Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Although
Yeah.
it took him a little while to come around to Jack.
Well,
Yeah.
the whole Lucifer's kid
No.
thing, you know.
And this is also, but the fact that he is so good with kids also annoyed me when we had that episode where they had the shifter baby, and they're like, he's like, I don't know what to do with this kid and diapers and what do I do and all this stuff. And it's like, no, that doesn't work, because we know he took care of Sam, you know, through Sam's infancy.
Yeah.
You know, so that was kind of one of those jarring moments of we have forgotten a basic tenet of Dean, which is he knows how to do this.
There are some episodes where you wonder if the writer had ever watched the series. That doesn't happen.
Exactly.
Now, we also got to see Dean as a son to both John and Mary, and John in real time, and then John who came back, and Mary. Anything stand out to you about Dean as a son, Melissa? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. The puppy is
That's
howling. I get frustrated with Dean as a son because he doesn't see clearly. He doesn't see his father clearly. He only sees big hero John Winchester. He doesn't see his dad for who he is. And at some point when you're an adult, you have to sort of let go that hero worship and really see your parents. And it's okay to still love them and admire them and all that stuff, but he doesn't see the harmful things John does. He carries us forward. The same thing with Mary, but I kind of let Mary go to a point because, you know, she was gone and now she's back, but he got a lot more frustrated with Mary than he ever was with John. And John was more harmful, even though Mary sold Sam so that this whole, that was what started the whole thing with Azazel. Yeah, I just get frustrated with Dean as a son.
Although he
That's
did.
a family trait.
Yeah,
That's another family trait. What was it? John's marriage with Mary never became perfect until after she died. They all, apparently the family men all rewrite their past history. Dad was a great father after he was gone.
And yet we did see that when Sam was back in the picture, Dean was willing to stand up to John. And I love the blocking for those shots, because when Dean does, he puts his back to Sammy, but he's facing John. So he's Sammy's behind him. He's protecting Sam, even if it means taking on his dad. And that's just the physical component of that is really telling. Michelle? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't really have much to add when it comes to son Dean. So yeah, Carole, you can hop in there.
Dean had so many years of being ground down by John and continually broken apart and remolded in the image that John wanted. And I think, you know, and therefore so difficult for him to try and stand up to John. And it was only when it came down to protecting Sammy that he was able to do it. He couldn't do it when Sam was trying to break free to go to college. You know, you figure all those fights he must have mediated between Sam and John, but it really wasn't until push comes to shove, as they're dealing with the demon for the first time, that he's able to stand up to John. And I don't think he had any of those issues, of course, with Mary, because she was gone. He left. He had those happy 4-year-old memories of pie and crustless sandwiches, and even going to Mary to give her hugs because he could tell she was upset. So when Mary came, he didn't have any of those kind of obstacles to his relationship with her. And therefore it was easier for him to get annoyed with her because he was just relating person to person. But John became this figurehead, this almost like a transformer. You have the person and then they transform into this, you know, enormous presence. And you know, that was really hard. He spent so many years, his formative years, trying to deal with that. And that's enormously difficult, you know. And then John was constantly, as we saw even from Something Wicked again, eager to lay the blame and guilt on you know. And it's not until Sam's finally like, you were, you know, 9 years old, there's no way you should have been the one in charge and responsible for this. This is on Dad, not on you. And that was, you know, practically a revelation to Dean. So son Dean, in terms of John, was, you know, totally weighed down and molded. It was very hard for him to finally break free. And then even when John dies, he still has, you know, that image and that love. And part of him can kind of acknowledge that maybe this isn't really how dads are supposed to be, but, you know, just like the marriage is perfect when they're gone, you know, John's perfection got a little buffed up when he was gone.
But he did finally come to the point where he could say, my father was an obsessed bastard.
Yes. Yep. He did. And a lot of time with Sammy and a lot of time realizing, you know, his own maturation once he was out of the shadow of his father and not seeing things through that lens anymore, that he was able to come to a more mature realization of what was going on.
And
I don't really have anything to add about Dean as a son to John, but I was always intrigued by the mother-son relationship with Dean and Mary. And I know that a lot of people didn't like Mary and that sort of thing, but I think that, to me, you know, Dean, as you said, Carole, had those 4-year-old memories, and then all at once he's an adult, his mother's an adult, and how does he relate to her? And she didn't want to come back. She was in heaven. She didn't want to come back. And Amara just sort of picked this thing that she thought he would really like to have his mother back. And, you know, it's that thing about, but there are consequences. And then Sam gives Mary the book, and she finds out all this stuff about John and how he left the boys alone, and it's just too much for her, because I think she feels guilty because she made the demon deal, and yet she died, and John became obsessed, and she felt like that was all her fault, and in a way it was. But Dean couldn't give her space to let her, or he didn't want to give her space to let her come to grips with that, which, you know, made me feel a little bit better about her and about the fact that she had to leave and try to get her head around all this. And, you know, she was a good hunter, so she went back to doing what she was good at.
Well, just remember that we do know what happens in the world where she didn't take the deal.
Yeah.
And that's apocalypse world. So, you know, she was damned if she did and damned if she didn't.
good point. Good point.
True.
Now, we also got to see Dean as both a shifter and a Leviathan, you know, the Leviathan version of Dean. So what can we say about Monster Dean? Elektra?
Oh, Leviathan, Dean, and Sam sitting in a diner talking about the neurotic feelings that they had is absolutely priceless. And then they force somebody to film them killing everybody in Dean's favorite diner so he can't go and get the best hamburgers on the East Coast. That is just absolutely priceless. And of course, the frustration that Dick Roman feels once they're caught and they're killed, the whole, well, now they've been declared dead. We can't resurrect them again. Because that's just pushing it one step too far.
Yeah. Carole?
Funnily enough, I think with both editions of Monster Dean, certainly with Leviathan Dean, Shifter Dean's more concerned with manipulating people, manipulating Sam. He's got the whole shifting thing going on, and he's getting their memories and things, and he can he likes to twist things around for them and make them, like add confusion to their already confused, who is this person who's not this person in front of me, and oh look, they're peeling off goopy skin. Leviathan Dean in particular almost harkens back to that early season 1 Dean, where he's having a ball. He's having a good time. He's driving around. He's shooting people up because he doesn't like them. He's snacking. He doesn't have a care in the world. He's just having his good old time, killing and, mowing people down and biting them, their heads off and all of that. So, I mean, for him, the quintessential scene is when he's driving in the Impala and Dean's fuming because he can't drive in the Impala, but the fake Dean can, and he turns and he winks. And we see that still shot a lot. It's a great shot of him where he's out the window and he's winking, and it's just, there you go. There's your cocky Dean again, because hey, he's a Leviathan. What does he care? He's got a lot of teeth. So the Monster Deans are pretty fun.
Okay. Melissa?
Horrible but fun.
Horrible but fun.
From a different perspective, I love the Monster Deans because of how the director chose to make this work. So the Leviathan Dean and the Shifter Dean, physically, they're Dean. It's the writing and the dialogue that, okay, that's Monster Dean, and that's the Leviathan Dean, and he's fun because he's more like, as Carole said, young Dean, cocky and just having a good time, versus like Michael Dean. Jensen portrays Michael Dean physically different. You don't have to, you could just look at his face, watch his walk. That's not Dean, that's Michael. Versus Leviathan and the Shifter, until their mouth is moving or they're doing something that's out of character for Dean, you don't really know. At least I couldn't tell. And I went back and watched the Leviathan episode again this afternoon. I wouldn't have known whether that was a fake Dean or real Dean. Versus when Michael's on the screen, you can tell that it's a Michael. And I thought that was interesting choices that both Jensen made and the director made to have those characters play like Dean and like Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And we also got Vampire Dean fairly briefly, both in the Twihard episode and then in that alternate future that Chuck showed Sam. And while in the Twihard episode, Vampire Dean was really upset about this new hunger and, controlling himself, we really didn't know there was anything wrong with Vamp Dean and Vamp Sam in that alternative until Jody and Bobby come breaking down the door and they bust out the teeth. So that was kind of a different take on it. Michelle, what about Monster Dean?
So what I was just thinking about when we were talking about Shifter Dean versus Leviathan Dean. So when we first see Shifter Dean, we see him for the first time realize that he's going to have his wings clipped. So this whole situation's going down, and Dean Winchester is wanted for murder and assault and whatnot. And this is the first time that we really see Dean getting to a point, especially with authority figures, that he can't talk his way out of this. Like he can't be smart, he can't be, charming, he cannot be Dean Winchester anymore. And so when we had the first Shifter experience, after that point, it's like, oh, well, what do I do now? Who am I now? Because this fundamental part of who I thought I was can't be anymore. And then with the shifter episode with the bank, and whereas there's that wonderful music transition with Renegade from Styx at the end when he's like, "We're so screwed." Also at that part, at that point, that's when they physically changed the tags on the Impala. And it's, the whole purpose of the shifters was almost to get the boys into this different stage of, we can't continue doing what we've been doing. It's not going to keep working. So how do we change it? And even though everything with the boys happens to be, revolving around change, they don't do so well with change. And so seeing their character development and the changes that they do end up making, usually reluctantly, as a result of these shifter experiences, it was kind of interesting, especially going back and rewatching it. It's like, oh, so at that point, that's when he stopped being like, okay, this makes more sense now. But yeah, we didn't get that with Leviathan Dean, because by that time, they're kind of used to being on the FBI's most wanted list and figuring out a way around that. But the first time really took him for a loop.
Okay, Anne?
That's interesting. You got me thinking in a whole different way about some of that, Michelle. But I think that the Leviathan Dean and Sam was a brilliant stroke. And even though I'm not a fan of the Leviathan arc as a whole, that was one of the better takes on it. And Dick Roman's way of trying to get them out of his hair, and that was an interesting way to approach it. Shifter Dean was interesting. You hit it right on the head though, Carole. With he was very manipulative, and it's interesting the different shifters that we saw over the years, like the woman who was the counselor that she had tried to again. Dean is learning the lesson about not all monsters are really bad. And I think that his experience at being a monster, at being the vampire for a day or whatever, also helped teach him about there's good and there's evil and there's a gray area in there too. And young Dean was like you said, Carole, kill the monster, get the girl.
Well, and one of the other things that you say vampire for a day, he was also a reaper for a day. And that also contributed to a shift perspective.
No, he was death. He wasn't a reaper.
That's true. He was death.
It's different.
Yeah.
And we should not forget that he was also a knight of hell.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not forget about that.
I was just coming to Demon Dean and Mark of Cain Dean, which we got to see a lot more of than just, a day. So you brought it up, Elektra, you get to run with it first.
Well, Mark of Cain Dean was very intense. That was where we finally saw the Dean who is, I can handle anything. Just give it to me, I can handle this. And he finally realized he found something he couldn't, leading to Knight of Hell Demon Dean, who led us to the buddy thing with him and Crowley that was it was great fun for all of us and great fun to watch, but was ripping Sam to pieces because having his brother running around with the King of Hell was just no fun at all for him. But the two of them are just comedy gold.
Beach drinks with umbrellas and then King of Hell. Yes.
Well, yeah. It's all fun and drinks and girls until somebody gets killed, Those are some of my favorites, I've got to admit, him and Crowley.
Anne?
Well, I have to agree. The whole demon Demon Knight of Hell Dean with Crowley, and we also get a glimpse of shirtless Dean in that one too. So
And shifter one, yes.
Your demon
Yeah.
bonus.
so but I think that that Jensen did a really, really good job portraying the Knight of Hell Dean. Again, as you pointed out about Michael Dean, his walk is slightly different. He carries himself in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
His facial expressions are even different. I mean, we see some of our Dean, good Dean, I suppose. But it's that whole, you know, well, what the hell is the phrase that comes to mind. And
Yes.
and it is comedy gold with he and Crowley. And that karaoke, oh my gosh. I mean, we all know that Jensen can sing.
Yeah. Michelle?
I really wanted more of Demon Dean. I wanted that to be much more than what we got. Just, I mean, for the reasons that was already stated, you know, just the way that Jensen played him. And this is really the first long-term time we get to see Dean as another person. So, you know, up until this point, you know, Sam was multiple different people for, you know, extended amount of time. But this is the first time that Dean got to be not Dean, and for a long amount of time. And so I really wish we could have seen more of that. You know, there, what was it, 4 episodes, I think he was in the whole Demon Dean, like really Demon Dean, and then he was in the bunker and whatnot. So there for me, there just wasn't enough. And, you know, that comes down to how it was played, you know, the comedy bits, the just the difference in the character. And it was just so refreshing because at that point, I mean, I'm not a Dean girl, but I do still appreciate him. And I kind of got tired of it. I kind of got tired of him being his whole like mopey, you know, I'm poison. I kill everyone that I'm around, blah, 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 blah. But then we get to see this Demon Dean and he's just like, screw it, you know? And it was some of the best episodes from some of the best Dean episodes, in my opinion.
Okay.
From those times.
I love Demon Dean because this is my boy having fun. It was like you took all of the morality of Dean's choices, all of that weight was off his shoulders. He's just out with Crowley, having a good time, doing whatever he wanted to with no consequences. And that was just, for me, that was fun, even though I know that there was going to be hell to pay at the end at some point. It was going to catch up with him, but it was still just so much fun to see. And all of the little things that Jensen brought to the table so that you could see, this isn't our Dean. This is Demon Dean. He's a different guy. The facial expressions and the walk and the chemistry between Jensen and Mark Sheppard was just fun. Anytime the two of them are together goofing around is always a good time for me.
Okay. And Carole?
Well, absolutely. I have to chime in that Dean Munn was fantastic and he was fun. He didn't care about anything, so he didn't care if he fell into bed with this one. And you know, and when he's fighting the Travis Aaron Wade's character Cole, when he's fighting him and he's just taunting him, you know, so casually, which we also see when he and Sam are stalking each other through the corridors, and he's just taunting Sam, you know, which is awful and horrible for Sam. But, you know, he just has that really kind of, you know, casual devil may care attitude. But I think in particular, part of what makes that work is the fact that we saw Dean for a whole season struggling with the mark of Cain. And if we didn't have the weight and the darkness of that before we got to Demon Dean, I don't know if it would have shown up as well. You needed that
Right.
contrast because Mark of Cain Dean is in agony. He's, life sucks in every way possible. And he's wrestling with these horrible urges that run in contrast to his normal, I'm out to save people. And here he is, he cannot control himself. When he butchers all those people and Sam says, tell me you had to do it, because it's horrifying. It's everything that Dean isn't and cannot stop himself from being. And he knows it. It's not even like it's happening and he's unaware. He's totally aware. And he's trying to drug himself with alcohol, anything he can. He can't control himself. He can't control these dark, dark, dark urges. So when he finally dies, and then here we have Demon Dean, that contrast is electric, just electric.
Okay.
And when he's cured of being a demon, he still has the mark.
Mhm.
And we end up seeing most of a season of him with the mark, and we get to watch that agony again. Season. Because if we didn't see that and watch what he was going through and his desperation, then that he was ready to go through anything to get rid of it.
Mhm.
The build up to the darkness and the payoff there wouldn't have worked. The build up there is so good in the fact that he was willing to give it all up. And he didn't care what he was going to pay to get rid of that.
And we had to
at
buy
one point
that.
he came to Death and said, Death, kill me. And Death said, I'm sorry, you're beyond my abilities at this point.
Mhm.
Too bad.
Yep. And we had to buy, when it got to that scene, we had to buy the possibility that he would really sacrifice Sam in order to end it. That had to at least present in some manner that it was a viable solution to him, or there would have been no drama in that scene, because we'd be like, oh yeah, he's never going to kill Sam, so what the heck, but even thinking, how is it he can't kill Sam, or if he did, then Sam has to come back, which is not beyond the realm of possibility. We had to believe that he was that much in agony and that was a real thing he was contemplating, to go into the pocket universe and contain himself there, so that when he doesn't kill Sam, it really resonates, and it's a really shocking moment when, 3 episodes earlier, we would have been like, well, no way will he ever consider sacrificing Sam, and he had to build it to that level with the agony of carrying the mark.
Okay. And then we have Michael Dean. So Michelle, start us off on Michael.
Oh, I love Michael Dean. He's my favorite. I mean, it was already mentioned before, but just the walk, the talk. You can see an image. If it was a promo image or a still from the shot from the show, and exactly, are we looking at Dean or are we looking at Michael? And it's all been said before about Jensen's acting abilities with that, but just the cool, collected pointedness of Michael. And even when Michael was in his other vessel, when he came over from Apocalypse World, we didn't see that kind of Michael. But once he got into his sword in this particular dimension, he was just there. He says, all right, this is my world and I'm taking it over. And he was calm, he was collected, even when Sam and Team Free Will 3.0 whatever showed up, and he was just like, welcome, now you're here, now you can die. And it was just so cold. It was a level of coldness that Demon Dean didn't get to, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And then when there's the scene in the bar when Michael gets locked into the beer cooler, and just the two of them together, the two deans together. Yeah, I wish I had words to describe it.
I don't want to denigrate the acting, because the acting is fabulous, but some of it is wardrobe.
Yeah.
They gave Michael a distinct look, and they were very good keeping to it.
Yes.
But yeah, a lot of it is acting.
I think even with the wardrobe, though, came the changes in his carriage, in his posture. I think of him as Vanity Fair Dean, you know, where he had these snappy clothes on. And, you know, our Dean that we're used to in the Carhartts and the flannels and stuff, he is just kind of, you know, rough and ready and this Dean was crisp and economical of movement, and he could be very still. Our Dean is not still, you know, he's rarely still. There's always something happening. Michael Dean was very calm.
I hate to say it, Michael Dean is the male model.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I was calling him. Vanity Fair Dean, you know,
he moves like a model.
or Harper's Bazaar Dean when he did that shoot, you know, with the coach and yeah.
And
Nice
his
blue
clothes are
steel.
more tailored.
Blue steel, yes, exactly.
I think they very deliberately were putting him in stuff that was more tailored, because the boys, God love them, those flannels are not carefully tailored to look like, they're not sloppy looking, but Michael's clothing is tailored to within an inch of its life. It fits him like a glove. And
that also kind of like what I was saying before about how everything he does is calculated and everything is very precise with, you know, with Michael. And yeah, his clothes, his actions, his hair. I mean, he doesn't have a strand of hair out of place. Something that, you know, that concept is completely foreign to Dean.
Dean goes for the
And one of the classic scenes to me is when he is working on trying to jazz up the werewolves and the vampires and stuff, and he's been doing the experiments in the church, and he's still wearing his suit, but he's got the leather apron, and he's got that knife, and at one point he flips that knife, and I mean, I got cold chills when I saw that the first time. I mean, he was just, it was the wardrobe, and it was the way he was carrying himself, you know, and we all know that regular Dean wouldn't have cared about getting blood all over his clothes. He did that all the time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Melissa?
Michael has an inner sense of self and a sense of confidence that our Dean doesn't have. Our Dean wears the arrogance and the confidence as armor, but when you peel that away, our Dean doesn't believe in himself nearly as much as he should, versus Michael is solid to the core. He knows who he is. He knows that he's the badass on the block. He knows he's got this gravitas that he brings to it. So you can, for me, I can see like a headshot, just like from the shoulders up, so that maybe you can't get the wardrobe to say, that's Michael. I can just tell from the expression on Jensen's face, right? That's Michael, because it's that, everybody has said, the stillness, but also there's just this heavy confidence that he's got no doubt. He's an archangel of the Lord. Of course he's going to win. And that just carries through to me for the performance. Everything. It's like, yes, there is no doubt that he's going to lose. He knows that he's going to win everything he comes up against. Fortunately, that plays into his ultimate downfall, but that's what I see when I'm looking at Michael.
Well, folks, we are out of time, and this has been a fantastic discussion. So thank you all very much. And let's do a lightning round here where everybody gets to say where people can find you online. Michelle?
You can find me on Twitter at preheatingprof.
And Anne?
You can find me on Facebook as Ann Wicker and on Twitter as Ann Wicker with no spaces and on Instagram as Ann.Wicker2.
And Elektra?
You can find me at untilmidnight.com, where you can find all the information about me.
How about you, Carole?
You can find me on Twitter as true_firesign10. All of my fiction is on AO3 under firesign10. And me as myself here, you can find me at TFWNC on Facebook and also here in Continual.
Melissa?
You can find me at the Facebook group that you moderate, the Supernatural Convention TFWNC. You can also find me stalking some writers over on AO3, Firesign, or hanging out here talking about Supernatural and Continual.
And you can find me online at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. Social media is all a variation of both of those names, or in the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. But most of the time, I'm here in Continual with all you guys talking about Supernatural. So thank you so much for a wonderful panel. And thank all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up here on Continual. So we'll see you online.